All right, we are live with Doug Ernst, author of Soulfinder Demons Match.
Cool. Thanks for having me on, man. Appreciate it.
Recently back from the Philippines. How was your vacation there?
It was extremely humbling. I got to, I mean, years ago, like in the '90s when I was in the military, I got to see how certain parts of the world live. But it's been so long that it was interesting to see. So for those that don't know, I went with this mission group, and so I got to work with kids that have cancer, kids that are orphaned, a lot of street kids, and then special needs kids. And then my wife went along, and there's a bunch of doctors that perform surgeries in some of these hospitals in the Philippines. The island is Iloilo, and it's called Marian World Mission. So I got to go along and do all that sort of stuff. And so, yeah, it was cool to see how parts of the world live compared to the United States, and it just puts a lot of things in perspective. I got sick on the way home. So like I was telling you before we came on, I got influenza A somewhere in either Manila or Hong Kong. And so if I cough, I apologize, and I cannot beat this. My nose is stuffed up and my chest has all this junk in it. So
it's a good thing it wasn't coronavirus.
Yeah, it's not too good. But if we were if we came into customs like a day later, they started, because we flew into LAX from Hong Kong, and they were quarantining people. If you showed symptoms of coronavirus, they were quarantining you. So I got in like a day before they started doing that, I guess. And if they would have seen me like sweating profusely,
that would have been
and
bad.
Coughing and all this, I probably would still be in Los Angeles right now. Who knows?
I think they moved a bunch of the people down to was it Wright Air Force Base or somewhere like that. I know that there was a plane from China that came back and they put everyone in a military base.
Yeah, I just know that I was on the plane. I think it was the Manila plane, and then I was like, I had this like dry cough, and I was like, oh no, because there was a guy who was with us. We were in these rooms, and then we were like packed, and it was like a bunch of dudes, and then like the women slept in another room. And he was the one guy. His name was Gil. He was sick the entire time, and I was like, oh no, I think I'm getting what Gil had. And then of course I did. And then as soon as we got to LAX, bad things happened. I just like sprinted for the bathroom. But I'm slowly but surely getting better. So this is my first actually appearance on a live stream since I don't know, since before I even left for the Philippines.
Yeah, it's been a while. I know you were quite busy doing all your fulfillment for Soulfinder.
Yeah, that took up so all of the domestic orders, those were dealt with AP. So they did a great job with that. They took that completely off the table. And then the international orders, I did that. I was just like, I will take that on. So those were never reflected in the Indiegogo numbers. And there was roughly, we'll just say like 100 international backers. And then after the books came out and then reviews started going up, people were able to go to Douglas Ernst at douglasernst.blog and ask me for extras. And enough people started asking me for extra copies and Christmas presents and all that kind of stuff that I just ordered another 1,000 copies. So hopefully I anticipate selling everything. That is the goal.
Excellent.
And then so that'll be, when all is said and done, 2,200 copies of Soulfinder. Wow. And I think that I'll be very happy with that for my first sort of foray into independent comics.
Heck yeah, that's, to be honest, it's not too far off what you see from some of the Image books and, you know, Black Mask and Vault and guys like that. That's pretty good for one guy hanging out in his study.
Yeah, so building up that YouTube presence and building up Twitter over the years, that definitely helped. Although these days on YouTube, it's as you know, it's just a bizarre social media landscape in terms of the reach that they allow you. There's like the attrition rate of your subscribers, and at least for me personally, I felt as though YouTube made some decision in the algorithm where they were just like, okay, whatever subscribers you have now, we're going to try and limit you to like this bunch, and if you could keep them, great. And if you could find outside ways of getting subscribers, that's great. But we're going to make it kind of as hard as possible for you to get new subscribers. And at some point in time, I was like, man, I can't be spending like 3 and 4 hours after work, like editing videos, putting stuff together, if they're just going to limit my reach this much. And so I haven't been on YouTube nearly as much. I feel kind of bad about it.
It is kind of tough. Even this channel is obviously quite small, but I did have a little bit of success, especially before Christmas. I had, a few videos that got over 1,000 views, and I had one 26,000 views. I had to take a couple weeks off just to be with the family, and right after, like, I'm back to like 100 views, 30 views. So I don't know what happened, but something changed over the holidays for sure. And I have noticed several periods in the past where they sort of turn off the faucet.
Yeah, they're constantly messing with the algorithm, and when they do that, it's frustrating as a creator, because you put in so much time over the course of months or even years, and then just with a flick of the switch or the push of the button, they can nuke your channel, and you're like, okay, well, now I gotta make a decision here about where I'm allotting my time and what I'm doing. And so I'm typically on Twitter quite a bit. But these days I'm just like, okay, well, I'll live stream. And if there's a subject that I really like, I'll do a video on that. But I have to concentrate on doing the next Soulfinder Demons match. So,
yeah. Do you find it kind of a hard balance? Like you mentioned the Twitter and the YouTube. Is it kind of a hard balance for you to continue with the social media stuff, but yet also try to progress with the next Soulfinder?
Yeah, that's been, we were talking a little bit right before we came on. So the first Soulfinder, I had it in my head for quite a while, and I was just working it out, and I knew I wanted to eventually do this book. And then, so like the opportunity came with Timothy Lim and Brett R. Smith and Dave Dorman to do that. Matt Weldon did the bonus material on the book. And so when that came up, I was like, boom. And I was like ready to go. And I had plenty of time to write it. But then with the next one, as soon as the fulfillment came through, it was like, okay, well, if I want to get another one out in 2020, I have to start writing now. But then I was still doing the international fulfillment. And then I was doing, the holidays came in. And then I knew that I was going to the Philippines. I did not know that I was going to get influenza A, and that was going to knock me out for basically like the past 2 weeks or longer here. So I've been trying my best whenever I get a little free time to write, but it's been difficult. I'm not going to lie in terms of trying to figure out how I spend my free time. But like I told you before we came on, I've been basically going to bed at like 7 o'clock at night because I felt so horrible with this flu. So hopefully this weekend, my wife's working a lot over the weekend. I want to make some serious progress on Soulfinder, the next one, and then get that to Matt, the first draft in March, Matt Weldon.
And how long do you think it's going to take before we can see Soulfinder 2?
The goal is to get it out in 2020 for sure. So the thing with the first one, thanks for putting it up here, is, how do I say it? I think we did it right in terms of, Tim was done with the art. Like I want to say like 98% before we even launched it.
Oh, wow.
And then Brett R. Smith actually had done a couple pages and then random panels. So we had plenty to put up there as well. But I want Matt to be completely done 100% with the artwork. And then there's a part of me I'm debating actually not even launching until Brett is done with all of his work and launching it. And then basically as soon as the campaign ends,
just ship it right away.
I could just ship it like within a week or whatever, right out the door. So I'm not sure. My main thing when I was talking to Matt about it, I was just like, all I care about is getting it out in 2020. So I don't know what your schedule is. I know you're a super busy guy. As long as you could commit to like getting it out sometime in 2020, then I'm fine with it. So that way people will be like, okay, he came out with one in 2019, he came out with one in 2020, probably going to do another one in 2021. And so it works out to like one a year with my work schedule. But the main thing is that turnover rate. So with the first Soulfinder, I didn't go into the in-demand mode. I know a lot of people do in-demand. We ran the 60-day campaign, and then boom, we just cut it off. And it was shipped within, I don't know, what was it? August is when it ended, September, October. So we were shipping like, I want to say like the first books were maybe like the 1st of November, or it was like super early in November. And we would have been earlier, but with the there was a problem with the gold foil, and they ended up having to actually reprint a lot of the books because there was like a misprint, and the quality control caught it. So we would have been early, but I'm okay with being on time with shipping.
Oh, that's, it's interesting you say that, because I was talking to Clint Stoker the other day about the in-demand phase. And just as a casual observer, it seems to me that there are a lot of books that really sort of perk up in their popularity or interest with a longer in-demand phase. Like even Zach's recent Jawbreaker book, he cut that off kind of quick. And I know certainly there's a lot of disagreement in the community about, who's late, who's not late, and how long things take. And I can certainly understand wanting to get the product out on time, like deliver when you promise. But do you think having such a short in-demand phase, do you think that might hamper the success, or are you more?
Well, it was interesting because after we closed the campaign, there was this like sort of flood of people that were contacting me. They're like, I missed out on the campaign. Can I like do it? And I was just like, there was like a part of me that was just like, dude, I've been every day hammering this book for 60 days. And then they're like coming in. But so I just told people, just email me. I will put you on a wait list. If you want a book, I will get you a book. And so that's been the case so far. So there were people that after the reviews started coming in, they're like, why don't you just do a variant cover and like relaunch Soulfinder again, and it'll do really well, and yada yada yada. And I was like, nah, just that ship has sailed. Just email me. If you want a book, just email me and I'll get you a book. And so that's what I've been doing. And obviously you don't see like the numbers popping up on the screen, how much money I'm making or not making and all this kind of stuff. But I like just being able to get anyone a book who wants a book. And so, yeah, it gets into all this kind of stuff about each creator and each campaign is going to be their own thing in a way. So for me to tell, say, Clint how to run his campaign, or how long, whether he should go into in-demand or not in-demand, whether he should do in-demand for a month or 6 months or a year and a half. I don't even know how long you could do it. But like that, to me, I feel as though it's not my place to weigh in on those sorts of things.
Sure.
And it's one of those things where the customers will ultimately put pressure on the creators. And if the creators are doing their job, as far as I'm concerned, they will be responsive to the customers and potential customers. Where like, listen, dude, like say I put in demand for like 18 months on Soulfinder or something like that. And they'd be like, okay, Doug, we're okay with like 3 months in demand, but 18 months, like, let's not do that. And then I'd be like, okay. So it's really just about feeling out in like how your customers are responding to what you're doing and then reacting accordingly.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. It seems like in there somewhere there's a sweet spot. And even though I think, at least at this point in the current Indiegogo comics group, there's kind of a similar audience. I can see definitely how each creator would appeal maybe to a slightly different segment of that audience.
Yeah, and well, what the thing with Soulfinder is, one of the things, I was a brand new quantity. Like I was a
Mhm.
question mark to people. People knew about Tim's work. They knew about Brett's work, Dave Dorman, obviously, Matt Weldon, all these guys. But I was a giant question mark in terms of my ability to put forth a quality product, especially with the writing. And so I was like, I need every edge that I could get. And there was this sort of narrative forming about books and people being concerned about them being
Mhm.
late. And I was like, okay, well, if I could take that off the table and I
Yeah.
could be a guy who says it will be out on this date, and then I could actually get it out. So it's like that immediately sets you apart
Sure.
in
Absolutely.
a good way in terms of that narrative that was sort of forming or whatever. So I was like, okay, so I want to get that. Also, I want to lower the price point for people because that was another thing that grumblings about, okay, well, these books, even if I like them, they're costing me $25 sometimes. And then there's shipping that's added. And then if it's international, it gets really pricey really fast. So I told Tim, I want to get the price point as low as possible. And so we had the $15 tier, and then it was $8 US shipping. And then for international, I only charged the international backers US shipping. So anyone who was in Ireland, Poland, the UK, Australia, all these places, they were getting $8 shipping. And as far as I'm concerned, they made out like bandits.
Oh yeah,
And
totally.
and so that might change for the next one. I don't know how long it could do that, depending on how many international customers. But I wanted to basically, and I want to continue to get the price point as low as possible. So for the next one, if say it's another 56-page book or 64 or whatever it is, I will continue to try and get that price point even lower without sacrificing quality.
Yeah, that totally makes sense to me. Yeah, I know. I know there's been times when I really had to make a decision like, okay, I can get one book, not, a bunch of books like I would if I were getting floppies. So, yeah, I would agree with you. Uh,
And sorry.
no, go ahead.
No, and that's another thing where it's a double-edged sword with social media, because on YouTube and Twitter you could constantly interact with people, and once they sort of feel they've gotten to know you on a certain level, they're more inclined. They're like, okay, I will pay a little bit more because
Sure.
I like this guy. It's so as long as you are not doing things to the customer, you could very quickly, like in a heartbeat, they could hate your guts as well. But I like that people could actually see me. I could be face to face with them, and you get that instantaneous feedback if people are asking you questions. Hey, Doug, what's going on with the shipping? Are you still on track? Yes, no. And so they just really kind of get to know you, and they're like, okay, well, I'm either willing to pay a little bit more for this product, or I'm
Mhm.
willing to wait a little longer in order to get it, because I could see they're sincere and they're trying their best to put forth a quality product.
Yeah, absolutely. I have to agree with that. So one of the things that really struck me about this book is as I was reading through it, I said to myself, "Oh, this guy Catholics." So it seems to me like you are definitely someone who has more than a passing familiarity, sort of not necessarily with demons, but as a guy who bears the ruler marks of nuns, I have some experience with the Catholic Church myself, and this definitely reads like someone who knows the sort of ins and out of the everyday Catholic Church.
Yeah, I mean, I did not go to Catholic school growing up. Looking back, there's a part of me that kind of wishes I did on some level, but maybe not. I wouldn't be the person I was today. So I grew up Catholic, like the cradle Catholic, and then I went into the military, and then I sort of like, I don't know, I'll just say I drifted away from the church for like a few years.
Mhm.
Whereas I wasn't attending mass on any sort of regular basis for a long time. And then as I got older, then I actually came back. I started reading. I sought out the best and brightest that has ever been sort of written in terms of the Catholic Church. And that is actually when I started reading all this stuff. I was like, oh, wow. The education that I got growing up, like I didn't even understand my own faith in many ways. Like it was like this razor thin understanding, and there was literally like 2,000 years of academics and the doctors of the church and all these people that were writing these really deep and well thought out, works, and I was just ignorant of them for a long time. And so once I started looking into all of that, then I returned to the church in I don't know, a way where I'm actually going to mass on a weekly basis.
And so, how much did you have to research for Soulfinder?
Yeah, that's what we were talking about before. Like the story was in my head for a while. I did a lot. We'll just say a lot of research. There was multiple books that I read on exorcists and anything dealing with exorcisms. I read quite a few books on that, and I had friends that were recommending books to me and highlighting passages and all this kind of stuff. So there was a lot of research. But so I thought of it on the front end, I'm going to spend a lot of time.
Mm-hmm.
But now that I read, the knowledge isn't going away, or I should say it is. It's always you're forgetting stuff. But writing the second one has been in some ways easier because I have that knowledge base and I could apply it to the second, third, fourth, and but I'm still doing research for the second one. So now there's all sorts of stuff that I was like, okay, well, now we're getting into especially when it comes to like the military angle and naval things and Navy SEALs and all that, then it's like, nuts. Like, well, I don't know X, Y, and Z about submariners. I don't know that. I don't know. So now I got to research that. And so there's always new research to do. And that's been a challenge, is trying to, where do you cut it off? Because you could endlessly research and then you're just like, well, I'll never get the book out if I'm reading thousands and thousands of pages on Navy SEALs or whatever it is. So,
at some point you got to get some words on the page.
Right. So, but I have a decent knowledge base of all the military stuff as well. But the second book deals a lot with, they're at sea quite a bit, and there's scuba diving and all sorts of stuff like that. And so that I admit I'm kind of weak on that, and I've been trying to get things to a, believable point where someone's like, okay, he did some research on this, and he kind of knows what he's talking about.
So for my normal boring day job, I sort of ended up researching like a lot of ancient Taoism and some Confucianism for very bizarre reasons. But one thing I noticed is, people back then had a very different way of thinking about things. And that's kind of one of the things that struck me about this book is, back in Old Testament times or even New Testament times, that the way of thinking about things were very different. And especially the characterization of the demons and, how they sort of affected people. It seemed more, in some ways, more of that old way of thinking. Did you do like a lot of research on there's certainly different stories in the Bible of possession and the Israelites battling with this demon or that god or something. Did you do a lot of research on that as well?
I would say one book that really influenced me quite a lot is Hostage to the Devil by Malachi Martin. I love this book quite a bit. I know there's a documentary, but I didn't watch that, and I probably would not suggest it. I heard it's kind of stupid, but this book probably more than any other book in terms of the demons influenced Soulfinder Demons Match quite a bit. The one thing that I liked about this book was the idea that possessions, people like want to believe that like a demon can just like hop into your body and then like you're like a puppet and they're immediately like controlling you and this sort of thing. And so I wanted to get this idea across that no, possession is something that it's incremental. It takes place over the course of many, many, many years, and many, many, many lies that people tell to themselves and others. So it's one of these things where you tell a lie, and then you tell another lie, and then you tell another one, and it's finally you're slowly changing your will over the course of time, so then it becomes aligned with the demonic. And before you know it, it's kind of like a sunset or a sunrise where you're like, whoa, all of a sudden it's like nighttime. And you're like, when did that happen? Like, it's like, it was so subtle. I didn't even realize it happened. And then it was just boom, it happens. And so that was kind of what I was trying to get across, especially with the Limax, those slug type demons. That is something just that very, very slow. They took over that couple over the course of decades and decades. That was the World War II veteran. And so Malky Martin's Hostage of the Devil is a big one.
Yeah, I think it really comes off, and it sort of, to me, sets this book apart from a lot of others, which are more, I don't know, they seem more like Hollywoodified, where we need this horrific demon and this and that. But this one, to me, seems a lot more realistic. Like you seem like, oh wait, I kind of know these people in my life, or maybe you even recognize some of yourself in this.
Yes. I got to be careful. I don't even get myself emotional or anything here, but so yeah, and even with the Father Redder's mother in this book, that was another one where her faith was weakened over the course of many years with the death of her husband. And so the demon at some point, so spoiler, says like, do you want me to take you to the point where your mother's own faith was shaken? And it was with the death of his father. And so the book starts off, obviously it says, why do bad things happen to good people? So that was like this sort of universal question that I wanted to explain, because everybody, they have someone in their life, or if you live a long enough timeline, someone in your life is going to die. Someone's going to get cancer. They're going to have some sort of crazy disease or something that just feels unfair to you, like God, or if you don't believe in God, if you're just universe or whatever, like you feel as though somebody out there is against you on a metaphysical level. And why does this happen? Why do little kids get cancer? Like I was talking about the Philippines and dealing with these kids with cancer. Why, how on earth, the question is like, how can a good God allow a little kid to get brain cancer? And so that was the question that I wanted to deal with, these that are very rooted in reality, the veterans that come back and they have their own psychological baggage that they have to deal with from war. And how do you deal with that? And hopefully I did that in a respectful way. I tried my best to do that. So yeah, it's definitely, everything is kind of rooted in real world questions and situations.
Yeah, I think it really comes off. And I was kind of wondering too, you have Father Patrick, of course, and then I guess his new mentor in the Soulfinder, Father
Reginald Craig.
Yeah. So they're both veterans. And it seems to me that it was very important to you to make at least those two, but I believe you said all the Soulfinders were vets, right?
Correct. So basically how you get recruited into this major order of exorcists is, well, obviously you have to be a priest, but then it's going to be an even smaller pool to draw from, because they have to be combat veterans. They have to have seen the horrors of war and came out with their faith intact. So a lot of people, they go off to war and they see all these, the nastiest side of man, and they lose faith. And so I wanted people that Father Redder was physically wounded. He was emotionally, psychologically wounded. His friends died. Literally, he lost a leg. He was scarred. And then there's the spiritual gauntlet that you have to go through. And so, but he was one of those that went overseas, Iraq, Afghanistan, was wounded and dealt with it. And at the end of the day, he still believes in God. And so that's the kind of person that the soul finders want to recruit.
I see. It certainly seems to make a lot of sense in that. Is there, how would you say, some of the other people in the book, I think Detective Chua was in the military, right? Or
no, he's not. I'll actually explore more of his past, probably a little bit in this next one here, and definitely in the third one for sure. And that actually ties to my trip to the Philippines. So some of what I was doing there, it just worked out kind of perfectly because he's half Filipino, half Chinese in the book. Is I was like, okay, well, I'm going to the Philippines, and I was thinking about his past and talking it over with my wife, and so his past ties to the Philippines, and so that will be brought in. But he is not a military veteran. No, he's just a cop.
Oh, my mistake. So there definitely seems to be a lot of camaraderie, especially towards the military, and sort of using that as I don't know, almost like if it's sort of a boot camp for these kinds of activities. Are we going to see? I think you said that there were very few soul finders left. Mm-hmm. Are we going to see any more soul finders? And
yes. Well, you'll see. So with the next one, you could kind of see the network that mm-hmm. is available to them. So obviously, they're all combat vets. They are veterans, and so they will have contacts within the military, perhaps other soul finders. And the military is also familiar with them. So
interesting.
In the intelligence community as well. So in this book, the cops basically, they want to keep all of this under the radar. So it's known that the supernatural exists, but mm-hmm. it's not something that anyone really wants to broadcast. And it's sort of swept under the rug for the most part. Uh-huh. And so in this particular world, and especially in the second one, there's something that happens with national security implications. We'll just put it that way. Okay. And so in the next one, I wanted to explore the idea that like the occult and possession, this is not something that's just relegated to the civilian world. What happens if you have the most elite units, but you have people that actually get into the occult that are Navy SEALs and or special operations forces, those sorts of individuals that were into that were possessed, and
so anti-soul finders.
So yeah, I guess. And so I wanted to put Father Redder and I wanted to put Father Crane up against a physical threat. More so, obviously the cult of Blackfire in this one, like they are a cult, they're people with whatever, but they're not Navy SEALs. They're not special, operators. Right. And so if I could actually put them in a place where they had a demonic threat, but also people that are outgun them, and actually their skills are, Redder's not some special forces guy. He was a soldier, but it's never implied that he was some sort of like super soldier or anything along those lines. He was just he was an officer in the military. Crane's a little bit different. I'll explore his. He is a pretty, we'll just say, special character. But when you're going up against these active duty Navy SEALs that are rogue, stuff like that, then it adds a different element of danger. And so getting back to your initial question, will there be more soul finders? You will see that they have networks within the military and other soul finders that they will, or other at least chaplains that they have contacts with that will help them out.
Oh, very cool. Have you thought about doing any in the past? I would be interested to see like how the Roman Legion dealt with this, or how, let's see, knights going to the Crusades had the same kind of issues.
One of my patrons, she has mentioned multiple times to me, she's like, Doug, I really want you to do like a Civil War era Soul Finder, or like a World War One or Revolutionary War era sort of thing. And I was like, no, I would really like to do that. And if I could, so Mike McNulty, he read the first draft. He works at Bam Smack Pow. He was over at Spider-Man Crawl Space for a few years doing Spidey reviews. Super cool guy. He's a Catholic dude. He's a writer, artist. I think a little bit of art as well. And he is someone that I told him, I was like, hey, I would trust you if you want to take on a Soulfinder story. Like, I trust you. I don't know if he has time for that, but if I ever, so I have my job at the newspaper, and that's really the only thing that's holding me up from doing more stories is there's only so much time in a day.
Right.
But I would love to do a Civil War or a World War One or a World War II era Soulfinder story. I think that would be cool. I think that the property lends itself to, there's all sorts of stories that you could tell. And there's an endless list of wars or battles around the world, and you could find people and create characters, and demons are literally eternal. So there's plenty of demons that you could come up with that they could battle in other different cults, all that sort of stuff.
Yeah, well, hey, I would definitely be down for that.
So yeah, it's really just a matter of time. And I was telling my wife, I was like, so my goal is basically to write at least 3 Soulfinder tales with Father Redder. I would like to do a prequel with Father Crane. I would like to put the 3 main stories at least into like a hardcover book. And then I'm hoping that as long as I could continue to keep the quality up writing wise, then I'll build up enough of an audience base where I could go to my boss at the paper and say like, hey man, I'm just going to go to contractor status, and I'm going to concentrate more on writing my own stuff these days. But that might be getting a little ahead of myself, but
well, it's a good goal
I would
to shoot for.
prefer to write Soulfinder tales over working for somebody else if I could make that happen in the next couple of years. So we'll see.
Yeah, I mean, well, hey, if you can be your own boss, why not, right?
Right.
Well, the other thing that's nice too is with this kind of work, you own Soulfinder. So
right.
10 years from now, you could you could do like a Disney, say you're going to put it in the vault forever, and then like 10 years miraculously it comes back for another version, and you can capture all those new customers.
Yeah, no, I'd like to keep it going. It's really like we were saying earlier about YouTube and social media is I really, at this point in time, I got to just make sure that I stay in contact with the people that purchased the first one, let them know that I'm just as excited about the property as I was before. And as long as you could at least stay in contact with them and like maintain that sort of relationship where they're like, okay, well, he's not going anywhere, and I could see he's interested in this, and it like lights a fire in his eyes when he's talking about it. So, okay, I'm on board. But YouTube is just so weird, and I don't know what's going to happen with that. It's kind of bothering me that they could just knock your channel off because they're like, you don't use it enough. So see you later.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of see developing is more of like a multi-platform. So where to extent you are a property. So we see some people like putting videos on YouTube, but then they'll also put it on BitChute or Minds. And I think to an extent, the trap a lot of people got themselves into was they wanted to get monetized.
Right.
And the goal of monetization is what's going to trap you, because if they change the algorithm or they change what they consider okay to be on, then, potentially your income is screwed. It seems to me that it's just a bad business model to have to rely on somebody else. Whereas like when you're publishing, you could go publish anywhere as long as someone will print that thing out for you. You're good to go.
Well, that's another reason why I didn't just like up and quit my job. And I was just like, okay, well, once you get in this, I'm in a good position because working for the paper, I'm responsible financially and save money and all this sort of stuff. So it's like, I know that I can afford to make the next Soulfinder. I would like to recoup as much of the cost as possible via Indiegogo or Kickstarter or whatever. But if I don't, I'm blessed to be in a position where it's like ultimately is like I'm still giving people a book that I believe in. Whereas other artists, if that's their sole source of income and they have to rely on YouTube and they're chasing after the monetization, like, and you're constantly following waves and what are people watching and what's the
Hmm.
algorithm telling me? That just gets, I'm so glad I don't have to deal with that. And I don't want to have to deal with that in the future. So I always want to be in a position where it's like, okay, well, I want to leverage YouTube to a certain extent, but I don't want YouTube to ever have really any real leverage over. Like, I haven't done a video for a month now or something along those lines where it's like, I'm sure some people are not happy with that, but I also like having the freedom to be like, nah, I'm just going to concentrate on Twitter and I'm going to write Soulfinder and people know that another one's coming out now. And I don't need to do a video every single day. I just like that freedom and want to be able to keep that as long as possible.
Yeah, and that seems to be the correct direction to me too. Like when in terms of comic book artists specifically, I see a lot of people on Instagram and showing their work there, but then they use YouTube as like something to elaborate
Right.
further. And to me, that seems to make the most sense to that you could theoretically jump ship to somewhere else, or even just uploading videos to multiple platforms.
Mm-hmm.
If you have like an image of the new cover for Soulfinder, you put it on Twitter, you put it on in Instagram, on all these other mediums, so you're not just locked into one.
Right. Yeah. And actually, I do usually especially when I was uploading more often, directly uploaded to douglasernst.blog and then also BitChute, which is it's just
Mhm.
Douglas Ernst on there as well. So you're totally right about across multiple platforms. But for me, the other thing that was weird was after the release of Soulfinder, I felt as though my content needed to change. And so before I was kind of more a critic of the mainstream
Uh-huh.
industry, Marvel, DC, and then all of a sudden I'm writing Soulfinder and putting Soulfinder out, and then I was like, well, what is my proper place now within all of this, and what is the kind of commentary I should be offering? And so I've said like there's an identity crisis in terms of my content because
Right.
I almost feel like I want to, I don't know, just be more positive or just concentrate on my own creations. Like I said what I needed to say in terms of like my issues with Marvel and DC, but at
Mhm.
what point in time am I beating a dead horse?
Yeah.
And is that even who I should be as a YouTuber anymore? Or should it just be focused on the craft of storytelling? I don't know.
Well, I think that's I've seen a lot of channels sort of slowly shift. And if you don't mind, I definitely have some questions about the early days
Sure.
of the YouTube. So now you originally started writing about comics on your blog, right?
Yes, that was the start of everything.
So and when did you start writing for the Examiner?
It's like the Washington Times.
Or sorry, Times.
Yeah, no, they're a friendly competitor as well, and based in DC as well. But so let's see. I worked for the Heritage Foundation. I'm losing track of time here, so we'll just say like around like 2009 to 2011, or like I was an intern and then I was a
Mhm.
contractor and then I was full time at Heritage for like a few years. We'll just say like 3 years basically,
Uh-huh.
and then around 2010, 2011, I went and then I got my foot in the door at the Washington Times. And I didn't write there initially. I took secretarial work to get
Mhm.
my foot in the door, and then I tried to quit like 6 months later. Uh, and but my boss at the time, to his credit, like knew that I worked my butt off for him. I
Uh-huh.
was basically on call 24 hours a day for this guy,
Oh.
and so he's like, "Nah, let me see if I could get you a job. There's like move you into a different department writing for this other website that they're starting." And so I started writing for it was called Times 247, and then I did that for like a 1.5 years, I want to say, and then they discontinued it, and then but then my current boss came on and he's like, hey, like we'd like you to basically come on and just write for the paper. And I was like, okay. So, and I've basically been there since, like I said, at the time, since around 2010 or 2011.
Right.
I actually did quit for like about 8 months because I don't know how much I want to say here, but there was somebody at the paper at the time that I was not a fan of, and I was just like, see you later. And then after that particular person left the newspaper, my old boss, current boss, he called me back and he was like, hey man, so-and-so is gone. Do you want to come back? And then I was like, as long as I only answer to you and nobody else. And he's like, done. So then I came back.
Very cool. So I guess kind of the point I was trying to make is you were at the time you started the blog and then the YouTube channel, you were a legit reporter.
Some people would argue with that, but
you were in the industry. And so one thing about comics is they've always been considered extremely lowbrow. If you're an adult reading a comic, people will look at you funny. And so what was it that made you say, yes, this is where I would like to dip my toe in the culture war?
So fiction writing has always been my first love. So even since I was a little kid, when I was in 7th grade, I was in this program. There was a couple kids basically they picked to go to transport them to the high school for a creative writing program. And I started that in middle school with really embarrassing stories. And then when I got to high school, then it was the same sort of program. Mm-hmm. And I did that basically throughout high school. So I always loved creative writing. And so then I went into the military. I was writing and doing screenplays and all this sort of stuff while I was in Germany and Macedonia and all this kind of stuff. Got out. I eventually ended up at the University of Southern California. I thought maybe that I would end up being a screenwriter out in Los Angeles. Then 9/11 and all that happened. And then that changed my focus again. And that's where I shifted and I got more into politics after 9/11 because all my friends that were still in the military were getting deployed. And then my sister at the time, she was at NYU. She was literally basically at ground zero on 9/11. And so that just it changed how I thought about everything. And I got away from fiction writing and got more interested in public policy and writing with that sort of stuff. But in the back of my mind, I always loved fiction and culture and movies and the effect that movies and stories have on the culture at large.
Interesting. But, you had the choice of movies. You had the choice of, you could have done John Grisham novels or, something like that. But why was it comics specifically that sort of got your dander up, I suppose?
I've said before I grew up, I literally learned how to read on comic books. My brother would read Spider-Man and Iron Man to me. My oldest brother, he'd sit me on like a little chair or on his lap and then just read Spider-Man comics to me. So since I was basically like 4 years old, I was reading or learning how to read on Spider-Man comic books. And I've just always loved comics. And at their best, we both were on the same page, but it really ticks me off when people act as if comics are just something, I don't know, to be laughed off. And it's like, no, you're telling stories just like any other. When you go to a movie, it's literally the same exact thing. It's sped up. The images are sped up, so it's moving for you or whatever. So it's no different in many ways than a movie. So I don't understand why the craft of storytelling would be different, whether it was in a comic book form or in an animated short or in a movie or whatever. It's just, to me, I feel as though, I don't want to go off on people, but it's just really embarrassing to me when someone acts as if a comic book is somehow intrinsically a lesser form of art.
I think part of it too has to do with the disposable nature that comics used to be.
Hmm.
They would come out every month. The paper was generally considered cheap. So I can see how, I wouldn't agree with it, but I can see how people would say, oh, that's not worth very much.
Right. Yeah, and I mean there are obviously comics that are garbage, and they they are not good. But it's like, to me, you almost set the expectations. It becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. If
Sure.
writers just believe it's a lesser art form, and they're just like, and they go someplace else, well, then that's what it becomes. But if people actually take it seriously, and hopefully, I hope Soulfinder is sort of attest to the idea that no, you could actually tell a story that is trying to be entertaining, but also offer something of substance to young and old people alike, where they could read it 5 or 10 or 15 years from now and say like, wow, this actually still holds up, and it instills a good, at its core, a moral message for people.
That's another thing I liked about the book is, in general, in most modern fiction, whether it's movies or uh, TV books, the members of clergy, generally in Christian religions, but also you occasionally see it in some other religions. They're not treated very well. They're seen as
Right.
like apathetic. Maybe they're just interested in money. And I mean, to an extent, we have a little bit of that in terms of the bishop, who doesn't want to be bothered with
Yeah.
these kind of things. But when you get to the people on the ground, you know, um, Father Patrick, he's going out and he's meeting with different parishioners, and
Hmm.
he's trying to make a difference in their lives, even outside of the exorcisms.
Right. Yeah, one of the things that I wanted to do, so how do I say this? One of my problems with the industry in general was I got sick of this sort of moral relativism, not knowing who is a good guy, who is a bad guy. It just felt like even the good guys in so many stories they weren't really that much better than the bad guys, and I
Yeah,
wanted
yeah.
good versus evil. And then I was thinking about exorcists and exorcisms, and um, most of these books, a lot of times the person performing the exorcism was not even a real priest. It was just someone who was in the occult.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
I was
yeah.
just like, okay. And then if it was a priest, maybe the priest would basically be like a bad guy. And I was like, you know what? I want to actually show an actual priest performing exorcisms, and he is not a mustache twirling villain at the end of the day. And then I want him to go up against pure evil, and it's evil because it's evil, and evil exists. And um so I don't know, I wasn't trying. The story always comes first, but at the same time there were some of these things that just bothered me in general about the way religious people are portrayed, particularly in
Mhm.
Marvel comic books these days, as if you're
Yeah,
Christian.
for sure.
And it was like, you know what? Like, I'm tired of this cartoonish funhouse mirror, weirdo evangelical, uh, I don't know, used car salesman sort of religion that's put out there. It's not rooted in a real humility and real faith. And so I just wanted someone who was just like, I don't know, a real dude who was a devout Catholic.
Yeah, and I think you kind of hit upon a point which I agree with. And when I look at works and when I write my own stuff, I always try to think like, well, there has to be some kernel of truth that this is built on. But
Right.
if, when it would be difficult, like, for example, if you didn't know anything about Buddhism, and
Hmm.
then all of a sudden you're writing Buddhist characters, even if I also didn't know anything about Buddhism, something would seem off because
Right.
it's missing that rootedness, which again sort of goes back to what I was saying, like with the way the demons are portrayed, and it seems like a very older mentality, how people thought of it in years past, not now. So it seems to me to be more effective, but it, in all these characters, well, I can't say all of them because I don't think all of them are quite flushed out yet. But all the main ones we see, and the mom and the sister and everything, you can see that kernel of truth in there, even if the specifics are different.
Yeah, and so with Pat, like Father Patrick Redder, he's someone where he actually gives into temptation. He wanted to see his father again, and he knows what he's doing is wrong on some level, but he can't resist. He gives. So even a priest can give into is tempted in many ways, and these demons are going to use your personal storyline. They're going to find that weakness, that psychological weakness from your past, and that's where they get in the armor. There's and everybody has that. So I wanted to show someone who, yeah, it doesn't matter who you are. You could be a very holy person, you could have all sorts of faith, but you still are going to be very fallible, and there's going to be weaknesses there. Or his relationship with his sister. His sister doesn't really have any faith. She's maybe a little new agey or whatnot, but families have people that disagree with one another. You could have a priest in the family, or you could have someone who's very religious, and you love your sibling or whatever, and they might be an atheist, they might be an agnostic, they might totally disagree with your religion when you're an adult. And then how do you deal with those sorts of questions? That's what I wanted to sort of explore, or set the stage to explore down the line.
Yeah, and I think it really shows too. There's just so much writing, bringing it back to the comic book industry, is so superficial, where they'll make a villain, but there's like no attempt to think about why they're a villain. It'll just be like grumble,
right?
Anti-feminist, something like that. There's not even a pretend attempt. So where do you see this? I'm kind of curious, where do you see the industry in the future? Right now, the big two, clearly they're still dominant, and they're backed by a lot of multi-billion-dollar company money. But do you ever see a time when, even if we'll say Comicsgate, or some of these other crowd-funded sources, do you ever see a time when they'll gain a significant share, or even smaller publishers like Alterna, can rise up and sort of challenge them, even at not dollar for dollar, but at least in mind share, in cultural significance?
Yeah, so as technology continues to get better and better, it puts more power into the hands of the independent creators. So being able to publish these books and actually get quality books out, and as people continue to find ways to just become more efficient at this, and as networks continue to form and people speak with, if you can find a good network and you get plugged into that network, there's no reason why you can't continue to get better and better at this. So someone like a Peter Simeti at Alterna, or even Clint, or hopefully myself, or Timothy Lim, or any of these other independent creators, if you are focused and you're determined and you're in it for the long haul, and you're also constantly trying to become better than you were the year before, there's no reason why you would suddenly backslide and become worse. So it really just is a matter of, I would say, the right network forming of individuals. So I'm still on good terms with Tim, obviously. I know Tim, I don't want to say too much. I don't know what he said on his own stream, but he's experimenting with a lot of stuff in terms of pricing and some other stuff. And I know from experience that when he learns something and I go to him and ask him questions, he's going to impart that knowledge to me. And then hopefully I could use that and make future Soulfinders better. So I think the long-term projection for independent creators is very, very good. And then, yeah, these big corporations, I I don't know, how do I say it? They're all over the map, and sometimes they get in like fads, and they
Mhm.
want to sink more money into this one year than the next year or whatever. And it's like almost on some level, like I don't even care what they do anymore. Like it would be nice if they continue to do their thing, but if they don't, I guess I'm just more focused on independent creators these days. And so I'm sorry if that dodges your question, but I'm
No, no.
positive about indie creators, and with the mainstream sort of Marvel, DC, and was it DC? Is it there? Are they owned by AT&T now? I'm losing
Uh,
track of
I think
whatever.
Time Warner, whoever owns Time Warner.
Yeah, so I think it's AT&T and Marvel, Disney, and all this, and it's like, okay, well, I would hope that they would see the value in cultivating talent within the industry, but if they don't, it appears to me that the technology is improving at a rate where people that want to put out good indie books, they're going to do it, and they're going to find their audience over the long haul.
And how do you think that works in terms of the culture overall? So I spent most of the 2000s, or at least half the 2000s, out living outside of the US. And one thing I noticed is that all this US media permeated over there. I was living in China for a while, and just things like James Cameron's Avatar, where
Mm,
people were being forced out of their homes, that really resonated with people. And it seemed like American media, specifically at that time, was very powerful. I don't know anyone who's, well, I shouldn't say anyone. I know a few people in Brazil, but for the most part, like woke stuff and these kind of I don't know, like I think of things like Star Trek, Star Wars, comic book characters as modern uh, American mythology. And I
mhm.
see a lot of what's going on is sort of trying to co-opt that mythology
Oh yeah, definitely.
without creating it. They just want to put a veneer of whatever some other agenda is on top of it. And do you think that independent creators, do you think that this work will also get out and spread, um, like for example in Soulfinder, you can see a lot of values of, I think you say Christianity specifically, but
Mm.
more of a religious lifestyle. You can see certain values of family and whatnot. Do you think books like this will get out and go and promote those values to other countries, or do you think it'll will just be swamped by whatever garbage the larger companies want to put out?
Yeah, I think, how do I say it? So with the larger companies, I think people are seeing that what they're doing is basically culturally hollow.
Yeah,
They could get away with it in the short run. They might be able to, and if you control enough of the media, you could just that in some weird way, there's a certain population that there's no way to say it other than they're basically sheep. They will just are buy whatever the media tells them is like, this is cool, and then be like, this is cool, and they'll just go with it. But there is also a very large population of people that they're like, you know what, this is something's off here. They're kind of wise to something's like this sort of, oh, we're subverting expectations, and it's like, no, you're actually just gutting it of everything that made it special to begin with, and I don't like it, and I'm not going to go see it. I didn't even see the last Star Wars movie. I didn't
no,
see that.
Mark
I
Hamill tweeted it's best to see it on cable, so I'm waiting.
Yeah, so I'm not alone. I know there's a lot of people that were just like, they stayed home. They're like, I'm not doing it. And so um I think there's just over time people sort of get that, and then
Mhm.
there's another track of essentially indie creators, and there's no way that you could predict what will hit a nerve, and
Right.
just like it just strikes pay dirt and it becomes like The Walking Dead or whatever. But on a long enough timeline, there's all these indie creators doing it, and somebody's going to hit the vein or whatever, the
Right.
cultural vein, and it's just going to be huge. Um, and then say with something like Soulfinder, I've said on a long enough timeline, I wouldn't mind if I could find the right network of animators, like paying somebody to actually do an animated movie. Even
That
if I
would be
had to
awesome.
pay, I'm making up a number here, like $50,000 or I don't know, $75,000 of my own money. If I found someone who I felt would do a good job with it and do it justice, I would pay those people to make a Soulfinder Demons match, the anime or something along those lines. But it's just a matter of doing it right. And then
Right.
so if you have people that are ready, willing, and able to do whatever they need to do to get their project to as many eyes as possible, you can never predict what's going to just go off with a hit. You know, it's like Soulfinder all of a sudden has this giant South Korean audience that loves it or something. Who
Yeah.
knows?
Well, hey, they are pretty rabidly Christian over there, so you never know.
Yeah, so it's like you don't know, but I just feel as though there's more and more indie creators doing their thing, and that's always a good thing as far as I'm concerned, because eventually somebody's going to resonate with a large population, and they're going to take advantage of that opportunity when it comes up.
This period kind of reminds me of college radio. Through the, college radio really got big in the 80s in the US, and top 40 was still the dominant form of music, but through these college radio stations you started to have bands like Pixies, and you got grunge and alternative that really exploded and took over the mainstream in the 90s. So I'm kind of wondering, if this is sort of a setup to that, or will it go more the Image route, which Image, okay, they're there, they still make stuff. If it wasn't for The Walking Dead, they would be a lot more irrelevant than they are.
Oh yeah, yeah, that is very true.
And it was a nice idea, but it kind of fizzled.
Yeah, no, it's tough to say, but I don't know. I almost think that Image, it was just this thing where the things came together perfectly with the guys that brought in the seed money and the IPs and all of that. And it's like you almost can't recreate that. It'd be very hard to do. And I like your analogy with these almost garage bands, and it's like REM in the early days that are like sort of southern garage rock or whatever, and like you said, the Pixies doing their thing, and all these different bands, and some of them don't like each other. Some of them do, but there's a creative force that's pushing everybody to kind of do what they think is right, and ultimately the audience is out there. And on a long enough timeline, when people argue about, like, how do I gotta be careful what I say here, but like in the end, it all comes out in the wash, and the projects and the properties that are strong, and coupled with creators that are very strong-willed and resourceful, they'll get where they need to go. And so I'm not too worried about that, and I'm just generally a more optimistic person anyway. So I just think on a long enough timeline, there's going to be a lot of cool stuff that's coming out over the next, we'll just say, like 5 years. I can't wait to see what happens.
Yeah, me too. I have to say I've been pleasantly surprised with the stuff that's come out to date. A lot of I don't think I've really been disappointed with any of the things that I bought, with the exception of one thing, which I knew it would be bad. But otherwise, like, I've been very happy with it. And I can definitely see, people being able to build on this foundation.
Right. Anytime you're trying to build something new, it's going to be messy, and there's going to be mistakes made, and some stuff is just going to, some people, you don't want people to fall on their face, but you're going to fall on your face. And sometimes actually falling on your face is good. It's embarrassing, but you learn something from even Soulfinder, as much as I was happy with the way things went, I made mistakes on Soulfinder. I made mistakes in how I dealt with Tim and Brett, and I did a lot of good things, but you're just always kind of learning. And hopefully, if you're trying to become better and better, then you can take those lessons and make a better product the next time around, and then the next time around. And even though, people like to point and laugh every time someone fails at something, or so and so didn't make X amount of money, or they're this late on a book, or what the writing is this, blah 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 blah. I was like, okay, well, everybody could be made fun of, but at the end of the day, in the aggregate, are these creators trying to take it to another level with each new installment? And I feel like the majority of people, whether you like them or not, ultimately their heart is in the right place, and they are moving incrementally towards the goal of making better comic books.
Yeah, absolutely. So with all the feedback that you've gotten, with all that you've learned, what advice would you give to someone trying to do their first book?
Yeah, I actually gave some advice to someone just recently on that. So I would say you have to do that groundwork in terms of social media before you launch. If you're launching an Indiegogo campaign and you literally don't have like 100 YouTube subscribers, or you have no presence on Twitter, like you have like 25 followers on Twitter, like you're setting yourself up for failure. Or if you don't have that, you need to be part of a network of people that are going to help you rise above all the noise, all the other projects that are out there. But you don't want to be in that position where you have to rely on other people, because people are going to let you down. People will always let you down. There'll be a small kind of cadre or whatever of people that you could count on in your inner circle, typically your family and your closest friends. But you don't want to be in a position where you're begging somebody to be on their channel. And that's where it's weird these days, where it's like, it stinks that you have to, on some level, build up your audience base.
Right.
But there's almost no way around it, because everybody's on social media, and there's so many different things vying for your attention. You could buy video games, used video games that offer, I don't know, 100 hours of gameplay. You like buy the used game for like $10. I don't even know, but like, it's like you're competing against like the remake of Final Fantasy VII in the next couple months or whatever, and all these other games or whatever. I always liked Metal Gear, and it's like, so you're competing with that plus movies and in the mainstream comic book industry. So you have to do whatever you can to set yourself apart. So if you're a complete unknown, if there's any way you could get like an artist with a little bit more higher profile, if you're a writer. And so with Soulfinder, I got thank goodness Timothy Lim introduced me to Dave Dorman, and Dave had the time in his schedule, and he was willing, after he heard about the IP, to do the cover for Soulfinder. So that was something that immediately, even though I was a unknown quantity, people saw, boom, Dave Dorman. And they thought, like, that's the guy from Star Wars and Dark Horse and all this stuff in the 90s. Like, it makes a statement. So you might not be able to get a Dave Dorman on your book, but you can find an artist who can make a statement for you. And there's plenty of young up-and-coming artists that can do that as well. So I don't know. I would say building the audience base, making sure you make a statement right out of the gates. And sometimes I see people that, like, they have a lot of like work that's not colored. I would say getting as much of it done before you actually launch and having those colored pages, that actually helps as well.
Yeah, I can definitely see what you mean. And definitely the cover and the back of Soulfinder look great.
Yeah, it was, like I said, it was one of those things where I was like, I need people to know that I'm serious. This is not a joke to me. This is not one and done. I at least want to do a couple of these and do my best with my job to put out these stories. And so if people know that you're serious about something and they can see that it lights a fire inside you, that goes a long way. But if it comes out and it's just like, yeah, and then your attitude about it is like, eh, they almost have to see that this is like an all-consuming desire for you to like get this book in their hands and you believe in it with every fiber of your being. If you're wishy-washy, why, if you don't even believe in your own product, like why would anybody else believe in your product?
Exactly.
So I don't know. I've just always been like, I want people, if they see some sort of like aura or whatever, like just exuding off me, or like, this is a guy that's got a story to tell and he really, really wants me to get this story and he believes in it, and maybe it might stink, but he definitely believes in it. And so I don't know. So that's another element in terms of, you would hope most creators would have that sort of mentality, but I've seen a lot of people where they almost like they don't believe in themselves or something. And then it becomes, again, the self-fulfilling prophecy where if you don't believe in it, people are going to see it on your face, on YouTube for sure.
That's true. I can see how it would be tough,
Right.
for people who don't have any experience in either being your own boss or in an entertainment industry or something with media, where, it's very hard going from you show up, you do your job, you go home and get a paycheck, to something that's really driven by how much effort you put into it.
Right. Yeah, it's it stinks because a lot of artists are introverted in general. And so you're not used to also being this like pitch man for yourself or the hype man for your like Flava Flav, but simultaneously you have to like wear that hat or clock. And then you also have to be the writer, the artist, and you have to be very serious and business oriented, and you have to do the accounting, and you have to be on top of tax stuff.
Yeah.
And so you're wearing, when you're an indie creator, you're the marketing cap on top of everything else. And so there are all these different roles that you have to play. And I've said before, humility is a virtue, and you need to have that, because if you're not a marketing guy, you need to have the humility to know you're not a marketing guy, and you have to get somebody who could fulfill that role for you. And so you have to really be honest with yourself about what you're able to do with whatever professional or personal constraints are on you. Because if any one of these, I don't know, like totems or whatever, these poles, if they aren't constructed properly and they fall over, you risk your entire project imploding upon itself. And you don't want that if at all possible.
All right. Well, Doug, I know you're nursing a cold. I'm having a blast talking, but I don't want to keep you too long. So, any last thoughts on Soulfinder? Any where can people get Soulfinder now if they don't currently have it?
Sure. Anybody that wants a copy of Soulfinder could just email me at douglasernst@douglasernst.blog. That's Douglas Ernst at douglasernst, ERNST.blog. Sometimes people put Ernest. But yeah, if they want it, then I basically add them to the list, and then I just keep going down and knocking them out. I was doing really well until I got sick. I've still been mailing stuff out, but I don't. As soon as I get better, then I will be able to knock out like 5 and 6, mailings a day or whatever, and get back in the swing of things. But yeah, as long as they email me there, they will get a copy. I have plenty to go around. And then, like I said, the next one will hopefully I'll get the first draft to Matt Weldon in early March. And if he likes it, and if Tim and Mark Pellegrini, they like the script, and we spruce it up a little bit or tighten it up, and then hopefully he'll get going on that in March, and then we'll see where the timeline goes.
Excellent. All right, everyone, go check Doug out on his YouTube channel, which I'm sure at some point you'll get back to. Check him out on Twitter and at his blog.
Cool. Thanks again.
So, all right, everybody. See you next time.
See you.